Hello everyone and welcome to Step-by-Step Success or Plan of Attack for Exam Success video. So this video focuses on the 5 steps of success for an outstanding grade in the exam. And of course it will also look at some of the pitfalls that every student should avoid. Okay, so let's begin with the first step towards the success. Okay, step 1 is knowing the play or the novel very well. So read it several times, as that is the only way to remember all the subplots, characters, etc. You also need um, to try to empathize with the characters, as that is the only way to understand their actions or choices. So if you do not know what empathy means, I have a definition for you. So really it's understanding their feelings. So kind of think of yourself as that character and try to imagine what you would do in his or her position. Okay. So another thing that you need to do for step 1 as well is also look at the characters in great detail. So what I would suggest that you do is actually make notes on these. Well, for the main characters, really you need to do this. Okay, so first thing that you need to do is, when looking at a character, is look at what the characters say. Okay, perhaps even how they say it. So you perhaps could even look at the adverbs that they use. Okay. The next thing is to focusing on what the characters do, so their actions. Okay. Third thing is what others say about them. Okay, because obviously other characters will talk about other characters, and therefore you can kind of get an indication of what the relationship is and how they view each other. Okay. And number 4 is how the author describes them. Okay, so you really need to make sure that you make notes on these, and of course to kind of just get holistic picture, so the whole picture. Okay, so the next step is step number 2 is researching the critics. Okay, especially if you're studying for a leaving certificate in Ireland or A level in England, you will need to look at the critics' opinions. Okay, so make sure that you research them, read them, and decide if you agree. Don't just accept that they are right. Okay, you have your own opinion as well, so argue your point and your opinion, and only use the critic's opinion as a sort of catalyst or an accelerator to argue your point. Okay, and make sure that you explain your point of view well. Okay, and make sure that also you need to include short, snappy quotations. Okay, so that's step number 2. Moving on to step number 3. Okay, is looking at past exam papers. So if you want to get a high grade in the exam, you must make sure that you know the layout of the exam paper very well. Okay, so when studying at home, you need to make sure that you try to answer the questions at home on your own, and then of course you can get your teacher in school to look at them later, or your tutor if indeed you have one. Okay, I think the most important thing as well, especially if you're studying with the Irish exam board and English exam board, of course you need to make sure that you go onto this website that is portrayed on the screen. Okay, so www.examinations.ie, and really if you click on there, if you go on there, you can see past exam papers, of course exam information itself, mark schemes. I think it would really help. Now if you're in England studying for an exam, I think it's also important to ask your teacher which exam board you're going with, and of course whether it's Edexcel, AQA, or any other exam boards, you need to make sure that you go online and of course try and answer some of the questions, download the mark schemes so that you know exactly what you need to do as well. Now, I do have one warning, okay, is that really don't just presume that the question that you looked at or perhaps written 5 or 6 essays on will come up in the exam, okay? And same thing with, if a question came up last year, don't presume that it's not going to come up, okay? It's better to always be prepared. Now, step number 4 is all about organization of your notes and learning. Okay, all of us have different learning styles. However, never just go with one style when studying. Okay, because really, if you're just kind of limiting yourself when studying, try of course to have different learning styles. Perhaps every day you'll have a different learning style. I think that would work very well. Okay, so once you've read the novel or play several times, you need to organize your notes. Okay, sort them into team notes and character notes. Okay, write them out again. You can also use post-it notes. okay, and kind of post them around your room. Perhaps write down the most important quotations from the novel or the play, and that way you can kind of every morning when you wake up you can see them there, and of course you're learning without even realize that you're learning. Of course you need to highlight your notes as well, sort them out, perhaps get a folder, write them out again. So the most important thing is to be an active reader. Okay, if you just read the notes, that's really not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to get you an A in the exam. So make sure that you look at your English book, and then of course perhaps you need to research as well, and if you research the critics and write down the critics ideas as well, that's going to be fantastic as well. So the last step is number 5, and this is all about the exam itself. Okay, first thing to do is know the timing well. What I would suggest you should do is when the exam starts, of course only when you can look at the exam paper itself, write down for each question when you need to move to another question. So for example, if you know one question is 20 minutes, then you need to write down what time it will be when you move on to the next question. Okay, always read the questions first and highlight the keywords. It's important to highlight the keywords because if the exam paper says "and," that means that there's another section to the question. So therefore you need to make sure that you highlight the keywords so you don't forget later. So once you've decided which question you are going to answer, jot down the quotations at the side of the paper as well so you don't forget. Okay. And I would always suggest that you plan. Now, I know a lot of you do not like planning, but that's really important, okay? It could only take you 1 to 2 minutes per question, and it doesn't even have to make sense to others. It just really needs to make sense to you. So you could draw something, okay? You could jot down words. You can obviously, you don't even have to write sentences. Of course you can if you want, but really should be a very, very quick plan. It could be like a spy diagram, which kind of you can understand what it says, okay? And therefore, every single time you look at it, you can remember which critic to use or which word you want to include or whatever else it might be. So now that you've looked at the 5 easy steps for success, let's look at the most common pitfalls. Okay, so first pitfall is don't summarize. Okay, it serves no purpose. You have to know what happened. That's the given. Okay, so you're not going to be getting any marks for summarizing the plot. Okay, we know you're supposed to know the novel. They're not going to give you a novel that you've never seen before unless it's unseen. Okay, but that's a different thing altogether. And the next thing is to avoid using long quotations. It's really just a waste of time. Okay, and obviously again it gains no extra marks. So aim to have short, snappy quotations, never more than 9 words. Okay, if I were you, I'd probably go with 6 words. Okay, so the shorter and the more explanation you can provide, it's better. Okay. What I would also use in the exam is I would try to identify language devices. Now, I wouldn't say there's a metaphor used. I perhaps would say the metaphor that is used, and I give it a quotation, shows something about the character or the theme. Okay, to me, that's an A answer. Okay, so you need to make sure that you don't just say there's a metaphor here. You explain what the metaphor, or indeed whatever else, whichever other device is being used, does. Only then you can get marks. And lastly, I would say don't focus on the context too much. Sometimes, depending on the question, you don't even have to mention it. Okay, so really read the question first and think about, is there any need to include context? If you are including context, never start with that. That should not be in the introduction. Always trying to include that in your main body, okay, as a backup of something. Okay, so really just avoid using that too much because it's really, you're kind of going off the question, okay, and you're not really answering the question too well. Okay, so now we reach the end of the screencast, and I do hope that you can recall the 5 steps to success. Okay, so that's quite important. If you can remember it, that's fantastic. If you can't, perhaps you need to write it down or take some pictures, and then of course learn them. Okay, if you're not sure of something, or you kind of have questions about something, you can always contact me. Okay, so don't hesitate. You can contact me and also check out my blog, which is gigantite.wordpress.com. Okay, because obviously it has some more videos there, and of course other things, other cool, exciting things on there as well. Okay, so really, thanks for watching, and bye bye.